Hello, hello, and welcome to our town hall today. We are holding it a little bit earlier today because we have an event to do at 1 o'clock. There's been a suggested agenda that was sent out. And one of the first things that we are thinking about as we reorganize ourselves is how do we actually set an agenda for this meeting? We kind of want to go back to the raw basics of making sure that everything's set up in a nice way, that everybody knows how they can contribute and what topics make good sense. And so this is really about a short discussion about how we should set agendas. Does anybody have any input on that?
I suppose leads of particular hold-ons can just come together and start taking notes on things that are important for the DAO. For instance, when we set our next meeting for the core, we could, I guess, brainstorm ways of putting this together. I know it sounds kind of like what we're doing right now, but I guess leads have more of a responsibility to get something like this in place versus just other contributors, since the other contributors are doing other tasks.
Right. The other thing I was thinking about on that is there needs to be a way that people feel free to add something that may be an issue or a concern that on the thing that they're working on, because we don't always know what's going on in all of the different areas. You know, the idea of having specialized areas like with yours, Philip, where you're marketing, is not everybody needs to work on every aspect of that. So therefore, the important pieces of that just need to be communicated to the rest of the team. So I guess the suggestion would be to think about how you feel like we should put things on the agenda. It seems like they should be on the agenda at least the day before, so that people have time to think about what we're going to talk about at the meeting. Which moves us to the second thing on the agenda, which is where we probably need to take an action item. And so we've done a good job with starting out putting together a framework for proposals and so forth that Troy put out. And I think we need to fully document how that whole process works, how decisions are made, how voting is done, and how people can actually put a proposal in. There's a lot of things that he brought up in some of the dialogue about getting stuff out there some days in advance, and one of the proposals talks about how many days is it necessary and what kind of dialogue is necessary. Also around when we induct new members, how long should they be helping in the DAO before they become a voting member, etc. So a lot of that stuff is out there. Does anybody have any suggestions on how we can fully document these processes so that they're above questioning?
Well, I have a suggestion. So, for instance, with all this with all the documentation looked over by an attorney, one that has actually helped us out before and gave us some input. His name's Kyle Brandon, and he could be an active contributor for us. We just need to give him some tasks to do, and he can help us frame out all this documentation so we're protected legally. So does that sound like a good option for you guys? Like having someone like him come into play to help us get this thing done properly? Rich, anybody?
I'm trying to let the other people.
Any input, Sebastian?
Well, if he has the legal expertise and background, it could be a good idea. but we need to find a way or a communication channel to let all the community know what we're doing up to date. And I don't know if that's just a legal problem or it's also like a communication problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's actually been inside our hold for, well, the legal hold and has been speaking with us. Apologize for the noise, but he's actually been with us for approximately like a little less than a month, and he's actually helped give us input on certain things, and we can get him voted in. That'll be good as well. It's just that the time constraints with him. So we would, if we really need him for something, we would have to utilize his time wisely. That's the only thing.
Okay, so welcome, Akaro. We're on item 2 in the email, email agenda. So we're talking about documenting our decisions and voting processes. And I guess the action item here would be, we really probably need to have a kind of a secretary role in terms of like taking real minutes and action items and so forth. What we have been doing is these video recordings, which is a much better way of capturing everything. But when we come to a final decision, those things need to be recorded. And then I think Sebastian has been doing a great job with that, taking the votes and adding them up and so forth. And so I'm just really suggesting that we tighten this up and more formally document it. That's all. And then the third thing is, how do we handle ballots, right? There's like a lot of things on the horizon that we're going to need to vote on. And this really goes into a lot deeper conversation. And so I put the long-term impact things that have been proposed. So ballot proposals was one that Troy put out there. How do we handle it? I didn't add all of the text around that because this isn't really about voting on any of these. It's about how we talk about them first and how we socialize them amongst ourselves so that we really understand what is it that we're voting on and for. And so, you know, the question comes on the ballot thing: when is an appropriate time to put something on the ballot? You know, there's some things that we need a quick decision on. There's others that need some thoughtful discussion. So what are your guys' thoughts and feelings on that?
Yeah, I mean, you know, Rich, a lot of these things that we're talking about is, you know, if we think about this in terms of, you know, a group, a club, an HOA or something, I mean, you know, you've got bylaws that kind of, which is what we need to come up with, right? How do we do things? How do you introduce stuff for voting? How do you, you know, things on ballots? How long do you give people, you know, things that are emergency and not? So I think we ought to go pull off some of that we can pull together ourselves, and maybe things that we're involved in. And then I think what Philip was saying, you know, this guy on the legal side would be a good thing, but because we need to have formality here, you know, a set of rules that we go by, and that's commonplace, right? Most organizations. We just need to figure out what that looks like for us and get some of this stuff out here. Maybe the legal guy can help and pull some of it together, right? If he's got some things in his back pocket, or, you know, we can pull some of that stuff together ourselves too, different groups and organizations that we're with. And pull some ideas out of the back pocket.
Yes, and
that's really what we need. No, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, it's all right. Yeah, so I agree with you, and I think this we should do to utilize Kyle's time wisely. We could do this. We could, each particular hold-on lead can take charge in drafting something, and then get input from the hold-on's team members, and obviously they'll look over the documentation. They want to wordsmith a few things, or if they want to add a few things to it, we all come as a hold-on to an agreement with certain things that's written in. And then other people who are working on different aspects of the thing, like for instance, marketing will work on something, governance, business, and so on. We'll come together, we'll look at the documentation together in this core group, and we will obviously piece it together ourselves before we bring it to Kyle's attention. So we got to find out, like, how are we going to divvy up this work properly? That's the next question we should be asking ourselves, since we come to agreement that it makes sense to get some sort of framework in place.
Right. And so to that end, fully documenting the processes, that's where an action item's going to need to be taken. How do we do this? Is there any volunteers at this point? Do we want to figure out where we can go get some of this stuff that's ready-made on the web, and just pull it together? So if there's anybody that wants to volunteer to do something like that and get us started on that, that'd be great. If not, we'll figure it out. The other long-term impact things are, how do we add new cohort members? Like Akaro has been helping us on the dev side, and has been involved with the dev stuff, but officially we haven't had the opportunity to vote him in. I don't know how that got missed, but we've got David now that was voted in, so we got to vote Akaro into the group officially. And those are the kinds of things that we want to make sure that we're not missing. And of course, he's definitely part of us, right, Akaro?
Hey, I have been very busy these past weeks, but I want to contribute here. And I have some ideas. If you invite me to a developers meeting, I'll be happy to join and share what I have in mind for you guys.
Yeah, perfect. And so that it's just, a little bit of a formality to get that taken care of. And so we'll just have to go back and make sure we clean up a couple of votes and add a couple of votes. So then treasury decision making, that was postulated by Troy as well, is, how do we actually do this? We've had a process so far that the 4 members of the proposal, the 4 proposers, are the ones that have been discussing the any use of funds, etc., and then bringing that to the group. No funds have ever been spent until this group here voted on it on the very first spend, and that was in the beginning of June, right? We decided that we wanted to hire Mutual Knowledge to take a look at the code base. Even so, we've had some people that have abstained. I volunteered to abstain from all voting, just out of matter of principle. So it's you guys that actually have the voting power to make these decisions. And then the question came up about, do we give the money back? If you remember, we voted on, should we just give this money back to Catalyst, or should we try to deploy it and finish our objective? And you guys voted to not give the money back, but to finish our objective. So that's the path that we're on. And questions came up recently about paying contributors, and like after some people have left, a month later, after we've offered them payment, they've come back and said, are we planning on paying people? And the answer to that is, we want to figure all of that out and make sure that we do, but that's going to have to go through more voting. So there's a lot of things that need to be voted on here, and then and so making sure that we have the processes well in place, and people are hearing all sides of the issues before we make just a willy-nilly vote, yes or no, without hearing the full impact. Some of these have long-term impacts, years down the road if they're not reversed. And so we want to make sure that we do this with thoughtfulness. To that end, we have a short-term action, new mutual knowledge put in a new development bid for us, and that is only to do the front end schematic work, the UI UX work that would define what is the ticket sale actually supposed to be. And then in the meantime, Akaro had mentioned that he works on schematics as well. So we may not need to outsource that. So we just have to talk through that. That bid was about 10 hours of work, I think, is what it came to. And it was about $1,200 to $1,800 to get that thing done if we used them. Now, the whole solution around that needs to be discussed. And so, Akaro, we'd be interested to hear what you're thinking.
I think that I can undercut their value and do a bit more than what you mentioned. I can start talking about it now. Like,
Go ahead.
I have a couple of ideas. Okay, so I'm looking at it from another perspective. I'm not looking at only the front end, but all the things that NFT-DAOs is proposing to do. And one thing that I start in projects like this, and that will benefit you a lot, is having what's called a workspace. A workspace is the structure I use to have multiple projects share multiple libraries. Libraries being parts of code that access that serves to certain functionalities, like accessing an API or running some commands. And I believe that since there are multiple projects that do similar things, we'll probably be using multiple the same libraries. And a workspace helps facilitate the development of all these projects and all these libraries at the same time. I could go into more details how it does, but I think it's besides.
Yeah, I understand the architecture, and I think that's great. I think we need to pull aside and have a specific developer meeting around that. We'll get Wilhelm involved, and I think we should get the mutual knowledge guys involved. And there's another set of developers that you haven't met yet, Akaro, that have come to us through the Agape pool folks who are working on something similar. And so we'll reorganize a meeting with all those guys and take the next step.
Okay, didn't want to get too technical. I just don't know what else to say at this point. So
yeah, no, that's great. And so that really is the gist of this meeting, is making sure that we understand what it's going to take. We've put a lot of thought into voting mechanisms, as Troy had mentioned, about over the last 5 months, having discussions. And what we're suggesting now is that we have somebody put in a proposal, give it a review period, and then go to vote. And that gives time for people to really understand what it is that we're doing or asking to be done with the proposal. And it's not dissimilar from what Catalyst does, right? So Catalyst, we put in a proposal, it gets reviewed and so forth. So the more that we can manage along that path, the better. And then, Troy wasn't able to be here today, but he mentioned the idea of making sure that whatever we're deciding, that it's clear and transparent about what it is that we're deciding, and that is posted wherever it is we decide, if that's GitHub or what. And so I think all of that makes good sense, and it will go a long way in clearing up any misunderstandings that people have had about how we vote, how we pay people, and so forth. So then the next thing was about that. that we really need to be clear about how the funding decisions are made. So I was asked by some people over through the Cardano community to make it a little bit clearer about how our funding process works and how we go about paying people and so forth. So we're doing that. And to be clear, it's this group here that makes those final funding decisions, right? So if we're going to pay somebody for something, it's you guys that make that decision. I abstain from any of that voting, but I have responsibility as one of the proposers along with Troy, and Tyler is being replaced by vote. You guys voted Philip in to replace him, and Michael Yagi has long been replacing Finley, but not officially by vote. And then he has recently stepped down as the dev hold-on lead, so we kind of need to fill his shoes there. And I don't know if we decided on anybody yet. Did we do a vote on who takes over for Michael?
Not officially, but informally.
What was the informal vote?
It was pretty much, we've kind of put the task on Larry since he was doing so much.
Yeah. Yes. What we did vote Larry in as tech lead, and tech lead is over development. So tech encompasses the whole aspect of everything we're doing technology wise, and part of that is development. So I guess that puts Larry in that position as a voting member and a responsible payee, if he accepts that responsibility.
Yes, no problem there, Rich.
Okay, cool.
It's my understanding.
All right. And then that kind of covers the main gist of what we wanted to do. Is there anything from the floor that people want to make sure we cover? I think we probably want to take the opportunity to vote in some members if that's possible.
Let's vote them in.
And that's the question, is it possible? Hood, you're our representative from Gov. Is it possible? Hood?
Oh, sorry, I got cut off by my thing here. What was the question? Sorry, my earphones. I don't have my wireless earphone with me.
Yeah. The question was, since you're our Gov guy, you're the only one from the Gov hole on here.
All right.
No, Sebastian's in Gov too, right?
No, I am not.
You're not. Okay, you're marketing. Okay. All right. So Hud, since you're the Gov guy, the question is, having said all that we said and realizing that we need some processes in place, how have we been able to vote new members in, and is it possible to do that in a meeting like this with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8 of the 10 people present?
Yeah, I mean, so far I think we've been doing it in such a way where we vote through the core cohort, right? Which is basically this. So I'm guessing because most of the core people in the older group is sort of gone or not even in here. I think we can. I mean, this almost already feels like a restructuring of some sort. Yeah, I guess we can. I mean, I have nothing against it. To be honest. So I think the main concern from before was like if we added people, well, what was the meaning of the core cohort in terms of, well, later on in the structure that if we were to get some sort of treasury going and we're supposed to be funding everyone, then the people in the core cohort are supposed to get somewhat a different payment structure than everyone else, and then from that comes the question of priority, well, importance of how do we vote people in? Like, do we, do they take, does it take, I don't know, is there a probationary time for a person to be just voted in on, or can anyone just be voted in? And it becomes a bit tricky when we get people who we know and trust very well, as opposed to just complete strangers. So I think that might be the case for completely someone who's not, who we do not know at all. Personally, and that's how I view it. But then, of course, this is open to everyone else, I guess.
Gotcha.
So,
Well, go on.
yeah. So the people whom we trust, can they be just voted in immediately without any probationary period to be added to the core cohort? And for strangers, is there a probationary time? And then the question is, how do we decide when one person is a stranger or not? And so, yeah. I guess the question is, do we want to sort of make this more centralized again, or do we want to keep on going with the decentralized idea? Because I don't know, truth be told, I'm not really even too sure exactly how to do the decentralized part properly.
And then what makes it decentralized is the question. Is it that so at some point you have an idea, like if we go back to the beginning, simply I was alone and I had an idea, right, and I wrote it down, and then a couple of people joined me and I said, hey, come along, let's go. Right. And there was no real vetting of those individuals. There was, some dialogue, and then the discussion came about that, hey, let's do a DAO. That Tyler brought the original idea up, and it sounded like it was something doable. And so we said, okay, let's work on that. But we actually have to work on this boxcar project first and get that done. But we've got people that want to work on the DAO side, and that was really Troy, who had a lot of reasons to do it because of school, right? But we didn't do anything to induct them, and they made it to the proposal, right? So I added them as co-proposers at that point. So there wasn't any real formal thing. Then we did go for a while, and we before funding, we came up with this concept of, we need to figure out how we're going to reward people. And so I suggested the contribution tokens, and that got started and worked on a little bit. And then we went to, you know what, we have to decide, it can't just be us four who are the core proposers. We need to add plus ones. And so we reached out into our networks of people who were working with us and said, yeah, these people have been demonstrating that they're with us and they're on the same page with us. So we elected to call that the plus one group of 16 total people.
Right.
And 8 of those have left, and then the rest of you guys have been them. And then we decided to add a few more people, David, Larry, Alex, right? But somehow Akaro got missed. So the question is, can we vote on him just like we did with Alex and Larry? And there was somebody else we voted in like that too, right? David, right? So
not sure.
I mean, yeah, so basically the core cohort, I think how that was chosen was basically, it's all subjective, right? So it depends on how often we've been here throughout frequently in all of the meetings, and we've been contributing and so on. But right now, like I said, again, since we are missing quite a big chunk of the core people already, I guess we can just add and then start from here as the new core. And then, yeah, for any new, I don't know, when should we decide? Maybe the decision would be that we have to decide now, is like, this amount of people is already enough. We trust that the people within this meeting will be somewhat contributing, or will be active and will be contributing.
Mhm.
And for the next group of people, if we decide that now, then the next group of people that we want to add, then we vote for them. And I don't know. It's quite a bit.
Yes.
This for me. I'm and what I mean by voting is more on the idea that for each of the lead hold-ons will, or at least the people in the core cohort will actually vote. And if we have a majority, then we'll just add that in.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's the discussions that need to happen. I think I think that probably this group needs to kind of say whether they're putting someone forward, right, for membership.
That sounds reasonable. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking like about the whole process in and of itself. It's like, I think we really need a more centralized, I mean, we have the Discord channel, but I mean, I've been lurking through it a bit over the last few days. And it can be hard to follow, especially with all of the thousands of channels. So perhaps we start more centralizing like things like votes, like we just made the core cohort channel, which is good. So what if we went just anything in votes in general, because it can be hard to vote on something if you're not fully caught up, you're gone for a week, you don't know what's happening.
Right.
So if we have channels that people can propose votes and do a quick write-up on like what's happening, this could happen for anything, whether not just adding new members. And I don't know about if every member is doxed or not, right? If we actually check out LinkedIn's of everyone before we add them. But if we do, we could add that to a private channel that only core cohort members could see.
Mhm.
So they can actually have time to evaluate and read about the person before we would actually make a vote. Because right now the system was literally like, when I read through the previous Discord private chat, it was just a quick text document there of saying, okay, here's 10 people saying yes or no or abstaining. But it's like, I appreciate the system in this because I got voted in through that, but at the same time, only 2, maybe 3 of you actually had any idea who I was. So I think that could be difficult for people who like Ikaru, Sebastian. I've never talked to them, or HUD or Wilhelm here. I've never talked to any of them. So it's important, I think, for people to know what they're voting on. So if we have like a Discord channel or something, whether we move to Slack, like a Slack community or something, or chapter, that could help. But yeah, so like I guess in summary, what I'm proposing is we make a Slack channel that's maybe viewable by everyone, but only interactable by core cohort members, and then people can post like, I'm proposing this person, here's their LinkedIn, etc.
Now, to add on what you just said, David, this is actually a private chat room, so no one other than us can see what's happening in the chat room.
In the core cohort or in all of the town hall meetings?
Not in the town hall meetings, but I'm just talking about in the chat group that you were added to yesterday. There was an initiative that he created a bunch of channels private only for people who are part of the core cohort. Similar to the way you said there was a Slack, but yeah, this meeting, we should have something in private where we could discuss serious business matters, because we want to remain agile in this competitive environment. We really shouldn't be giving away a lot of what we're doing. We understand the importance of transparency. I agree with you too, but I agree with you as well as with this. We need to have some sort of place where we could talk kind of quietly amongst each other.
Yeah, so I guess like I'm building on that. So we obviously, as a DAO, it's supposed to be open to public, right? So I think, do we need to be, and like I don't want anyone watching this to take this the wrong way, do we need to be fully transparent in why we're voting ways, Or do we just need to be transparent in how we're voting, like yes, no, and like showing people that the vote? So like, do we want a private area for us to discuss as a core cohort, and then we have a public voting result? Or
I like it.
yeah.
So that's exactly the kinds of discussions that we need to have, and which is why this meeting was prepared not to vote on anything, but to mention all of the things that need to be voted on. Right? There's so many pieces and parts that are going to need to be voted on, and I think that one of them should be, adding the new members who are already been with us and have been contributing, but for some reason they were not part of the initial 16, since that initial 16 was made well over a month ago, and some of the people weren't with us much longer than that. So
I have something to add to this real quick for transparency purposes. So right now, I remember before this meeting started, you asked everybody for their first and last names instead of their pseudonyms. And that just got me thinking, why don't we do this? We have a roster of everyone who's the core contributor on paper or in some sort of Google document for people to view to see who's involved, their LinkedIn, if they have a LinkedIn, and their first and last name, as well as their usernames for full transparency purposes. I don't mind giving my LinkedIn away, not literally giving it away, but just showing the community that, hey, I'm a real person. This is my first and last name. I don't mind doing something like that. Just to give the community that we have some sort of accountability mechanism in place. Like, hey, this is my face. This is what I'm doing at the DAO. Does that sound reasonable to everybody?
Yeah, I agree, but I think
sounds reasonable.
Absolutely, I fully agree. I think though, not a Google Doc. I think we should really start trying to centralize communications, either around a Discord or a Slack server. So we just make a Discord channel with that pinned information that anyone can.
I like it.
Yeah, because a large difficulty for me has been tracing through.
Yeah, right. Finding everything, right?
Yeah, finding everything, and then I also saw that on the weekly or the stage 3 and 4 update, that was also one of the previous developers' complaints, that they went and built the Slack channel because the tracing threads, etc., on Discord can be very difficult.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this is what we should do then. All right. When this call's done, we put our name, our first and last name, our LinkedIn, and then we should have a Discord made, maybe by Larry, if he can do it for us. And we will put our information in on one long piece of paper, not a Google document, but just on something like Word, where we could just have a list and a link to it. Does that sound better?
Makes sense.
I mean that's fine. So I'm assuming Slack is a much better threadable conversation that people are more used to. So is it possible? I don't know how to interface that between Slack and Discord. Is there a way to do that?
I have no idea, but it is the problem is, so they do have publicly open Slack systems. I think they're called Slack chapters. I think we would have to apply for one to see if they would actually do it. And it would be similar to Discord, where you can invite anyone and they can join. I'm sure they have permission space. I don't know if. See, it's another question. It's
it almost sounds like that's a technology question that really we should let the technology team deal with. What's the right technology? But you have some input on that, so maybe you guys go neighbor on that and talk about it.
Yeah, we need to think about that. I mean, there's pros and cons either way, right? And somebody's not going to be happy whether we pick Slack or Discord or whatever you want to pick. So yeah, I mean, David, let's talk about that. We can bring in a couple of other people and figure out what the best alternative is, and then we can, like I said, we'll make it work, right? Because they can all get cumbersome. Teams, Slack, I mean, it all gets confusing as hell. when you've got, 800 conversations going on. So,
Yeah.
um,
So
yeah, let's talk about that on the side.
Yeah, I just want to call the meeting because it's 12:42. We're 2 minutes over what we scheduled for. But I do have a piece of information I wanted to share with the team. Some pretty cool information. It's not public information yet. So if, even though we're going to probably publish this publicly, hopefully people will respect the concept. And so given that, maybe I'll just turn the record off at this point, because we've got some pretty cool things to share. Does anybody have a problem if I turn the?
No, I agree, Rich.
Okay, I'm
Take
gonna
it off right now.
In the meeting.
All right, and then hold on.
You get
Okay, yeah.
mobile.
Let's start.